What's good, guys? It's your boy Delinkquent coming at you with a special deck profile today. I'm gonna showcase you the deck that won me World Championship 2021 of GoFormat.com. Usually I present my decks with a simple screen recording from Duelling book. However, this time I got something that's way cooler for you. So my good friend Jean, aka French Alpha on Dueling book, sent me a deck containing real Yu-Gi-Oh cards. I mean, in 2021, like, so much is online that it's actually kind of rare to even see real cards. But however, you will see the real deal, and I'm gonna showcase you the deck that won me the tournament, the infamous Panda Burn. So, first of all, thanks Jean for all those cards. It's actually so awesome to not only see cards on screen, but to be able to really hold them in your hands, and I think it makes the whole thing like cooler to showcase. So let's get right into it. What do we have for the beginning? We have 3 reds that are giant, so we're gonna call them giant reds. Giant Red is, I'd say, my hidden champion of the whole year, because I was fortunate enough to win 3 tournaments this year, and all of my decks contained 3 copies of him. So it seems for me like an auto include or like a recipe for success. Some people don't like this card in the actual format because against Chaos it's actually a little bit risky. Your opponent just might banish it for free with Chaos Sorcerer or BLS. However, I'd say if you time this card right, you can actually benefit from it. The cool thing in this deck is that it's like the best toolbox I could think of in Panda Burn. You could search out your Panda, you could search out an Injection Fairy Lily, an Exiled Force, or in my particular build, even a Kinetic Soldier. Or you can just buy yourself a little bit time with searching out another copy of Giant Red. So this card is very versatile and it allows you to do very cool plays. You can put it in defense mode and eventually just stall out for a bit, or you can put it in attack mode and crash into an opponent's monster and then summon a Lily or a Kinetic Soldier to somehow make a surprise attack, which works particularly well with the Giant Runade or Heavy Storm I also include, but I'm going to show you that. So, then we got the Endangered Species, Mr. Panda. Gyakugiri Panda. This is the card that gives the deck its name. And this card is absolutely awesome because you can, in some weird situations, stall with it because it has 1600 attack of defense, but most of the time you want to be aggressive with it and attack over opponent's monsters. If you combine this with level limit area B, it's particularly well because like most opponent's monsters would have a defense that's less than 1300 points, which you would have automatically if your opponent has at least 1 monster, so you could attack over Blade Knight, Kaikus, and so on and so forth. And this is what makes this card very strong, especially because it also inflicts piercing damage. Cool battle trick, if you guys don't already know it yet. Let's say your opponent has a Blade Knight or a Kaiku on the board, and you summon this poor little lonely panda in attack mode, and set Ojama Trio. You can actually pull off like a super cool trick. Let's say your opponent plays a Kaiku and wants to attack your poor panda. You can activate after their battle declaration Ojama Trio, summon 3 completely useless tokens to their side of the field, and then make Panda have 2800 attack. The coolest thing about this is like your opponent wouldn't even get a replay because the amount of monsters on their side of the field changed and not on yours. So that's for sure something you should keep in mind, because this might really be painful for your opponent. Then we got the spice of the deck, 2 copies of Kinetic Soldier. Modern Yu-Gi-Oh player might say, Cypher Soldier, we know it better. We are old school and we know this card. is Kinetic Soldier. So what's cool about Kinetic Soldier, his stats are decent. He has 1350 attack points. As a side note, the 50 can actually be relevant in a mirror match. If your opponent has a Panda and Kinetic is your only monster on the field, you can attack over a Panda for free and kill it with like 50 points of damage, but be careful about the battle trick. I just told you if your opponent could do the same with the geometry, then you wouldn't really look too good, so be careful doing this. However, like this card can attack under level limit gravity bind, and this card can actually also stall under level limit or gravity bind. Because it has 1800 defense, which is decent, and actually might save you some games. I definitely had situations where the Kinetic was all I need along with the bind or level limit to stall out the opponent until I got all of my bind. It's obviously mainly good against warriors, but if I may give you a super good advice, this card can also kill BLS. And well, this might also be a game changer, because BLS is obviously like one of the biggest threats you can face off. Very good if you have this handy little soldier to get rid of. Then, that's it for the 2 or 3 copies. We have Breaker, auto include, is aggressive, like might inflict some very valuable piercing damage and might shoot an opponent's Mystical Space Typhoon, Wind Blast or whatever. Then we got Cyberjar, aka the best card in the deck, arguably. If you were able to resolve Cyberjar, it's very likely that you win the game, because this card fills your opponent's monster zone and his hand at the same time. So your secret barrels, your just deserts, or your Panda will be much stronger than before in a lot of cases, unless your opponent's field was full of monsters before, but then you should eventually consider not setting it to begin with. But otherwise, this card is awesome. It also gives you 5 fresh new cards, so a lot of times you will be able to summon a Panda or like get some more burn cards and just win the game. So you should really try to let this card resolve. For instance, if you have it on your starting hand, if you have a bunch of other monsters, eventually first set like a Giant Rat or something else to bait cross-outs, to exile force, and keep this card until you feel quite safe that it will resolve. Definitely wins the game single-handedly. Then Exile Force, like nothing too special, searchable with Giant Rat. Sometimes very valuable to get rid of an opponent's BLS or to help you clear the board for inflict some battle damage. Then Injection Fairy Lily, aka Fairy on a Needle. Very nice card, like awesome to search it out with Giant Rat, and it inflicts like a lot of times a lot of damage, so if this goes directly, you are also very likely to win the game. Then Mr. Morphing Giant, aka my absolutely favorite GOAT card of all time. I would like to play Morphing Giant every deck I play. Sometimes it obviously is not a very convincing include, but in this deck it's so awesome. It's a little bit worse than Cyberjar because it doesn't fill your opponent's monster zone. However, it still definitely increases the amount of damage you inflict, because you are, if you're happy enough, like lucky enough, like very likely to draw a few burn cards, and also give your opponents more cards in their hand to make Secret Barrel way more pain. So just play it. And also do the same thing, as I said, with Cyberjar before. Not always gonna give it away the first situation you can, but try to eventually set something else. Set something else before to get around, cross out, and that's all. Last monster in the deck, Sangan, like a very very nasty beat stick. Your opponent doesn't want to waste any battle traps on it, and you can search all of the cards in your, all of the monster cards in your deck, except for Breaker. But otherwise, awesome. And very very nasty to inflict 1000 points of damage to Sangan. Very very good in burn decks in general. So that's it for the monsters. We're coming to the spell cards. We are already having a rat that's giant, so it also makes sense to have a Trunate that's also giant. Super cool card. It baits out Solemn Judgments, it clears the board for a massive swing with Panda or Lily or Kinetic Soldier, and it also doesn't decrease the opponent's card count, which sounds very weird to begin with, but if you want to make your secret barrel quite effective, this card is in a lot of situations even better than Heavy Storm. Let's say if you give your opponent like 3 back row cards back to the hand instead of storming it, then every single secret barrel inflicts 600 points of damage more. Something you should calculate. Then we got 2 copies of Level Limit Area B, super good, makes your Panda even more valuable because what I mentioned before, like a lot of opponents' monsters don't have too much defensive points. It also stalls out, just wins your game, play it, definitely a 2-off. Then we have Graceful Charity, doesn't need any explanation, very very strong card. Heavy Storm, as I also said before, like clears the board. Very good also to bait out opponents' Solemns. Very good, of course, if your opponent for some reason might main deck Royal Decree. Trinity also helps, but Storm is in a lot of situations even better, obviously, because you can get rid of the decree permanently. And yeah, well, no other explanation needed. But remember, always try to do the pro Storm, so set it, wait until your opponent sets some cards and then activate it. From the bottom, feel like a real pro. That's how we want to play. Then we have Pot of Greed. No one knows what it does, but I still think we should play it. Snatch Deal. Snatch Deal is also quite cool in this deck because you can actually do a lot of shenanigans. I think my favorite Snatch Deal interaction is one that some of you might know but others don't. Let's say your opponent has, for instance, an Ojama Trio token at his monster side. Then you Snatch Steal it, turn it to attack position, and then Giant Trinity afterwards. Your opponent can't even interfere with, let's say, Book of Moon, because he can't flip the token face down, and the result of the shenanigans is that your opponent will get back his token, but now it's in attack position. And now you are way more likely to inflict a huge amount of damage than before. So, Swords of Revealing Light, nice synergy with Trunade, also gives you 3 turns, brings your opponent to the awkward spot where he doesn't really want to waste any any spell and trap removal on it, and buys you 3 turns, which can be very powerful, and most important of it all, it really protects your jars against Blade Knight and Mystic Swordsman level 2 that otherwise could just attack under, let's say, like Joker. Then we got 3 Hungry Monkeys, aka just Deserts. Awesome card, inflicts a lot of damage, especially in conjunction with Ojama Trio. Very very good, it's chainable, so even if your opponent activates Heavy Storm, you will still somehow be at least able to inflict a lot of damage. One thing some people don't know is if you have Ojama Trio and just Deserts face down and your opponent doesn't have any monsters at all, be very careful. I would recommend then to just activate Ojama Trio in their standby phase, for instance, because if your opponent activates Heavy Storm and you have just Deserts and Ojama Trio at the same time, you're screwed because you can't activate both of them, because this card requires a monster on the opponent's field side. And if you think that you are smart enough to first change his Desert and then Trio and then he gets his tokens, no, forget it, it doesn't work. So be sure that your opponent has a monster before you set this card, otherwise you won't be able to chain it. And unfortunately the sophisticated combo with Ojama Trio doesn't work. Another very very spicy tech card is Nightmare Wheel. Those of you who followed my previous decks know that I really love Nightmare Wheel. It's awesome, it stalls, it inflicts damage, like it can take care of opponents, Magicians of Fate, and so on and so forth. And even in a mirror match it's awesome because it can stop Panda from inflicting a huge amount of damage. Some people don't like it. You could also include other kind of burn cards like Wave Motion Cannon, or my brother, for instance, came up with the idea of playing Chain Energy, which is technically not a burn card because they have to pay, but let's don't do this. However, I prefer Nightmare Wheel, and I'm very glad I included 3 copies of it. I can only recommend you to do the same. Then we got, oh gosh, those guys are super nasty. Ojama Trio. Those card looks useless, and those tokens are quite useless. The good thing is that your opponent gets it. So you could stack your opponent's field. In a lot of situations, you actually want to block your opponent, to lock him down. So Ojama Trio can be used to shut your opponent down. Meaning, like, if all 5 monster zones of him are occupied and he is not able to escape from the lock, you can just sit back and wait until you draw all of your burn cards. If you try to Ojama lock your opponent, be careful, don't summon any monsters because of Torrential Tribute, plus don't summon or have any monsters in attack position because your opponent might escape from the lock by just crashing 1 or 2 of his monsters into your face-up monster, and then you could set or summon more monsters. Keep that in mind. Then we have 3 kind of secret barrels. Well, also probably doesn't need any further explanation. Same as just Desert, chainable, might inflict huge amounts of damage after Cyberjaw. But even if you're not resolving a Cyberjaw, you can still make like between 1 and 2,000 points of damage usually. That can definitely decide games. 2 pairs of Gravity Bind. I like to annoy my opponents. That's why I play Goat. And with Gravity Bind, you can annoy definitely the hell out of your opponent. It stalls, especially against warriors. It just buys you time, and it's very, very recommendable. However, if you're in the field not so full of warriors, eventually also containing some kind of other Panda burn, or in general burn players or combo players or whatever, you might think about kicking this card. However, in an environment with a lot of warriors and also chaos players, I would also just recommend it against chaos. This card is awesome and definitely a 2-of. And then you got more or less like the Goat Trinity of Burn. Those are like the usual 3 burn cards: Ceasefire, Cylinder, and Ring of Destruction. I don't think any of those cards needs any further explanation. I would recommend playing them. Some people don't like playing Magic Cylinder. However, for me it worked out quite well. Even though I play a lot of stall, like bind, level limit, and so on and so forth. Meaning that in a lot of situations your opponent might eventually not even have a strong monster that is able to attack. So I'd say the Cylinder is eventually debatable, or you might exchange it for something else. However, Ceasefire and Ring are just nuts. You are also nuts to play, so just go for it. That's it for the main deck. I would probably keep the main deck quite similar to this. Like I said, Kinetic Soldier eventually is not necessarily a 2-of, or keep 1-of, but you might exchange 1 of them. The Cylinder is also debatable, but I mean, it worked out quite well, so I don't want to even trash talk the main deck. However, I think I would rather trash talk my side deck because I wasn't too comfortable with it. I mean, it's actually the first time I played Panda Burn on a regular tournament. I only played it 1 time before at a Sleepers Meta tournament because, yeah, exactly, I'm the kind of guy that screws a Sleepers Meta tournament with Panda Burn. Yeah, I know. I also think this is quite hilarious, but well, whatever. So this was actually the first time I played on a regular tournament Panda Burn, and I wasn't really too sure what even to include into the side deck, so this is kind of random. What do you do when you want to include random cards? You include Lava Golem to get the Marek versus Joey feeling. A card I initially wanted to have to get rid of opponents' Wanghus if they're siding them in, or like Cliff the Trap Remover, Death Wombats, all kind of those cards. Well, didn't come up too often, and it's also a bit double-edged if you give your opponent the strong beta. So I don't know, I would probably kick it out of the sideboard Then you got 2 copies of Mystic Swordsman level 2, which is also debatable, I'd say. I probably would rather play something different, or at least not 2 copies of it. Eventually 1 might be fine, but 2 copies is probably a little bit too much. I mean, I had everything in my mind saying, oh cool, this card can attack below level limit, below bind, and still I'm not too sure, and that's in theory, but in practice it doesn't count too often. So eventually you can still have 1 included, especially because there are rare situations where you can also search with Giant Red, but in general probably also rather something to eliminate from the set. Then you have Spell Canceller. I myself am a combo player a lot of times, so I'm not only playing Burn, I'm very versatile. I also play combo, so you know I play all the fun decks of the format. And the card that annoyed me the most while I was playing combo was always Spell Canceller. So I felt like this card is awesome against, let's say, Reasoning Gate, it's awesome against Library, it's awesome against Empty Jar, because it completely shuts down the entire deck, more or less. Sure, your opponent can also be smart inside in stuff like Compulsory or other cards, however still this card is quite good. Some people might prefer Cyberstein because the monster you summon can actually attack and inflict battle damage. However, I rather felt like Canceller is good, and this is just a personal preference, so you don't really have to play it. Then we have the 3rd Kinetic Soldier. You see, I really like this card a lot, especially against Warrior. Nothing else to say. Then I got Tribe Infecting Virus, like very, very pesky card. In Panda Burn mirror matches, highly recommendable to get rid of tokens. And on your side of the field, actually, if your opponent tries to flood your field with Ojama tokens you can get rid of, you can also destroy. Very big Panda, and this card is quite good. However, I don't really like it in the main deck, so that's why I put it into the side. 2 Nobleman, well, a card that doesn't really need an introduction against Chaos, especially it's awesome against other decks. It's not so awesome if you have it against Warrior. Well, then congrats, you just have a completely dead card if your opponent just blanks out all his face down monsters. So I don't really feel too comfortable playing it in the main deck. You might do so still. However, I didn't really feel like it. If you guys want, you can give it a shot. A lot of people play it in main. For me, it didn't really feel too good, and yeah, well, definitely not a card you necessarily need. Mystical Space Typhoon, sure. The good old MST, the card that you know that when you start Yu-Gi-Oh! You think this card can negate other cards by chaining it. Unfortunately not, but it can definitely get rid of, especially Royal Decree or other nasty cards. So this card is very good, and I almost always side it in game 2 or 3 to get rid of like Royal Decree, Zing Zangu, or Zing Dust Tornadoes if I'm lucky sometimes, and so on and so forth. So some card. Then I have 2 unknown cards, and those cards are almost literally unknown because who has those cards? Like Jean that built this deck, like really put a lot of passion into it, like didn't have this card, and I mean, who has those cards? What am I talking about even? This is Barrel Behind the Door. If you don't know this card, it's Golden Barrel Behind the Door. So you better check that out on Google if you don't know this card. This card basically redirects battle effect damage you would take from an opponent's card effect to your opponent, which is awesome because it just neutralizes a burn card of them and makes you actually burn them instead. However, be careful, you can't activate it against Wave Motion Cannon, so that's something you should know. If you want to get rid of also opponent Wave Motion Cannon, then you should rather play because Circle of Enchantment or eventually Hall of Life Barrier. However, Golden Barrel is cooler, it's so cool that no one even owns it. Do you guys own this card? I don't know, I probably don't, so we're gonna remain close. Cross. Last two cards are Torrential Tribute and Mirror Force. In a lot of decks, auto includes. In this deck, not too great in a lot of situations because you want your opponent's monster count to stay high. Meaning like your just deserts and your secret barrel will otherwise just be way less effective. Your Panda will be weaker. So even though it sounds paradox, it's actually quite a good thing to have when your opponent is having like a lot of monsters. So those cards are debatable. I like Force against Warriors, I also like Torrential against Warriors, and I like Torrential against all kind of combo decks and also in Mirror Match, it's awesome. So that's it for the side deck. I would change some cards. I would, for instance, include Mass Driver. Shoutouts to all the guys that brought out Mass Driver at Worlds. Giorgione, for instance, was very smart pulling this off, and unfortunately won against my brother with it. I've seen some other people like WZ that I faced in the final as well with this card, and this card was completely screwing me over as well in I think at least one game. So Mass Driver is pretty cool. And I probably might also think about stuff like Mobius, for instance, like I saw this at KL 1993's side deck. Also shout out to him, he's actually the pioneer of Panda burning gold in general. So this is also quite nice card, and probably also some other cards I would think of. So that's it for this deck profile, guys. Hope you learned a little bit, hope you had some fun, and well, as I would say, thanks to Jinzo&Tonic one more time for having me. Thanks to all the people that support me. Thanks to GoFormat.com that even hosted this beautiful tournament. And yeah, that's it for today. Thank you very much, guys. Delinkquent signing out. Stay tuned. Bye bye.